Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their callings and industries. Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with someone you might call a maverick in the business world and workplace culture. He's affectionately known as the Grampian to his 16 grandchildren, and I've been told, apparently, he's called the curator of culture in boardrooms across North America. So Jim Tracy is our guest today, and he's a force of nature who's been shaping the ideas of the business landscape for decades. So from humble beginnings in his garage or garage, depending on where you live, to scaling multi-million-dollar business enterprises, Jim's journey is nothing short of interesting and inspirational. But what sets him apart is more than just his business acumen. It's his unwavering commitment to fostering environments where employees feel truly valued. And that, my friends, means a lot, because there's many employees and employers who are going to want to hear this message. So our guest, he's a jet pilot, a podcaster, he's an author, award-winning business individual, some might say icon. Jim brings a unique blend of high-flying adventure and down-to-earth wisdom in everything he does. Now, before we roll that intro, ladies and gentlemen, please share this with your friends and networks. I know there's going to be many who are going to enjoy this conversation, and it's evergreen. So if you're watching this in December, just know that we didn't shoot it in December. It was earlier than that, but share it. And I know that many are going to enjoy this conversation. There's two other things I'm going to ask you to do before we roll that intro. Is if you could be so kind as to give 5am Podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. We would appreciate that. And we definitely need to thank those who have ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am Podcast and bought us a few cups of coffee this week and last. We do appreciate your support. And if you want to join those early risers who've bought into the mission of 5am Podcast, we welcome you to help us help others seize their days. Now, let's roll that intro. Jim Tracy, welcome to the 5am Podcast.
Wow, Michael, great to be here. I'm honored. I'm stunned. I'm glad it's not 5 a.m., but hopefully somebody's listening at 5 a.m.
That's right. Early bird truly gets the worm, among other things, and maybe some peace and quiet, depending on the environment of your home. It can be a good time for sleep, or just to be up and start your day with meditation or devotions or whatever the case might be. Now, we were talking about this earlier, so I'm just going to get this out of the way. You're known as Grampian to your grandchildren. Can you share the story behind this endearing nickname, and maybe does it reflect your approach to both family and business?
I never thought about it in terms of business, but I was out, we were in a cabin and I was playing a card game, a cribbage game with my grandson, Wes. We kind of teach our grandkids to play cribbage so that they learn math skills.
Yes.
And beat him. There's no mercy at our house in cribbage or in cards. And he said, "Hey, you're no longer grandpa." And I'm like, "What? That's crazy." And he said, "You're no longer champion either." And then he said, "You're Grampian." And it was an endearing term. And it stuck. The other grandkids picked up on it. And so I'll take that handle any day.
Yeah. That's great. So your journey, let's get into the business side of things. Your journey from starting a business in your garage to scaling it significantly, I'm sure many, myself included, would say that's remarkable to be able to pull that off. Were there some pivotal moments or decisions that really propelled your growth?
There's so many, especially on the entrepreneurial side. I often say my wife and I would run to the mailbox looking for a check, she on the left and me on the right, looking for a check so we could make payroll. And there's a lot of those kind of moments. And we had an office manager at one point, and we just learned that sooner or later, this thing is reliant upon more than us. And so, uh, our office manager was very concerned sometimes that we were not going to make payroll. And I coined a phrase, seldom early, never late. sometimes we would run to the mailbox and there would be a check in there that was an early payer that we didn't know whether it was coming or something like that. And God blessed our business. He looked with favor on us. And that in many ways has become kind of the mantra of our reliance upon um, a higher power that is Jesus. And for many reasons, he blessed us with more than we could have ever asked. It's just, I'm stunned. So I have to pinch myself.
Right. And so was this in those early years, what was it that really kept you other than running to the mailbox for checks? What was it that really caused you and your wife and maybe your son too to dig in and say, "No, this is the hill that we're building on
Yeah.
and we are sticking together through this."
Yeah. Well, when you're in a startup, you make some decisions that are really long lasting and defining. The first decision that we made is that we were going all in. And so I had some management incentive plan money and I had some retirement money and I had some savings and we just went all in. And when you go all in, there is no turning back, there is no turning around. You're betting your family and your house and everything else on your ability to produce something that might be just a little bit better than the other guys are producing. And so we came up with some sayings at Legacy that really told a tale of who we are. When we went out to a job site, we would come up with phrases like perfect is good enough. And people, I mean, I've had some people that came to me and said, "Oh man, you're setting your people up for failure because perfection is not achievable. You can't do that. You're doing industrial construction. It doesn't have to be pretty." And I'm like, time out, time out. If we're aiming for perfection and we hit like super awesome, isn't that a win? And so our insistence upon producing a higher quality, especially a safer environment, we worked at elevation building towers. And because of that, if you don't do the little teeny things right, you don't do the medium things, you don't do the big things, just bad stuff happens. And so we early on committed to the idea that we had to be better than the competitors. And that is a reflection of not only our commitment, but then our people buy into it too, because we had to value them, not as more than a commodity.
Right. And sometimes that is missed maybe in the corporate jungle is knowing how valuable the people are. But in line with knowing how valuable your people are actually is how we train and how we interact with them. Do you have maybe some stories or some insight on understanding the true value of those that are helping you build your dream or getting you to your goals?
Yeah. Well, we put together four pillars that were kind of the cornerstone for our people to claim. And it was character, quality, safety, and delivery. And character is simply what do you do when nobody's looking? And that is the first, I guess, pillar or hallmark of our business. Because even when nobody's watching, you got to be doing the right thing. And safety, of course, is paramount in an industry where if you fall, you take a 150-foot plunge. And we, by God's grace, never had a really serious accident where someone was disabled or maimed or heaven help us, fatality. So character delivery is just doing what you say you're going to do. If you promise it on Wednesday, let's try and have her done on Tuesday and give us a day of time where we can literally under promise and over deliver to the customer, to the client who is really on a wireless time frame. We always said we move at the speed of wireless. So character, quality, safety, and delivery quality. I mean, everybody talks about quality, but the execution of quality goes back to character and delivery and safety. If you do all those little things well, when you walk away from it, there's a little piece of tape that you have to put on a connector. And we wanted to make sure that our tape, which is one of the first things that people see, everybody slapped it on, and we wanted our tape to be perfect. And so if you look at those, again, the pillars of our business, that's really what built legacy. It wasn't me, or I'm not smarter than anybody else or anything. And my son had drive and was all in as well, raising a young family. I mean, we started this when he was literally 17. Wow.
Well, that's a fascinating origin story. I've got to ask about dealing with innovation and whether you're trying to play catch up to innovation or you're on that cutting edge or the leading edge.
Yeah.
Can you talk about maybe some of your experiences where maybe you realized, oh, we have to innovate to kind of leapfrog, or we have to protect some XYZ to ensure that we're staying on that cutting edge?
Yeah. Well, when you're in the contracting business, and that's essentially what we were, was a steel contractor but the folks that worked for us also had to, they had to be technologically astute because we're dealing with radio frequency and microwave and the radios that serve the antennas and the filters that clean up your voice so you can get it to the next person. And I always found that it was to our advantage, a significant advantage to lead the curve rather than to follow. And I'll use a really silly example, but one that changed it really changed our business. Now, when we started, we would like literally take Polaroid pictures. I forget what they call it, but they would come out and then they would see a copy of the picture right as it came out of the camera. I think it was Polaroid. Anyway, and then we would tape those into a quality control book. And then we would turn that into the carrier. And once they got to look at it, you'd redline the plans and hand that book in. And once they approved it, you could get paid for it. The advent of email and providing our people with laptops and email addresses that were branded to our company, we were literally the first one to do that with field employees. And so what we did is we had a technologically astute customer and we needed technologically astute employees. So we would teach them how to use this. It sounds silly, but this email product as a construction manager to report with photographs every day on what happened at the site. And the folks who would receive that were like going, "Wow, how do you do that?" Well, it's just execution of a good habit. Takes 10 minutes right before you leave the site. So when everybody else is cleaning up the site, you say, "Here's what happened. Here's what went wrong. Here's the changes to the schedule." And it sounds really silly today, but when you're the first one to do it, we would try to raise the bar. Every time a competitor would catch us, we would try to be two steps ahead so that when they inevitably caught us, was looking for the next. What's next? What can we do better? So
Yeah.
I guess they're silly stories, but they worked for a long time.
Yeah, no, they're good and good practices too for us to keep thinking ahead and how to improve and what sets us apart.
Yeah.
And what were some of those conversations maybe that you and your wife and your son, or maybe just you and your wife or somebody else had of, I think someone's catching up to us. What's our next thing? Are we ready to go with this new plan?
One of the stories that I really love is we launched a business to do drone flight inspections on communication infrastructure facilities. And on the larger scale, that business didn't work out. But when we incorporated into what we did, we would literally produce a digital twin to take our customer that they're not allowed to climb towers. And so, but we could take them on a trip up the tower. And some of those conversations were just like that. I wonder what we could do next better. What are we not seeing? And the other thing, we became really involved in our industry's trade associations so that you had a pulse of what was going on in the marketplace. And if you knew what was going, so we were in the Seattle market, but if you were on the West Coast or on the East Coast, there was somebody that was trying to leapfrog you. In touch with those folks on a regular basis, you could see what's coming.
Yeah. So it's like the power of networking
Mm.
and being in there. Now, you've been inducted to the Wireless Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken. How has this evolution of wireless technology really influenced your business strategy over the years?
Wow. Well, I don't know that I'm in the Wireless Hall of Fame for anything other than trying to do the right thing. And I say that because we always try to do the right thing in our business, but that transcended into some other things. The Tower Family Foundation is something that we founded as an industry organization. And I was fortunate enough to be chairman of the industry association when it launched. So, but what we did is we took care of the families of tower workers who succumbed to injury or who were seriously injured on a job site. And there was a 2-week time in there when the system hasn't kicked in, but they still got to have groceries, travel money, rent. There's lots of needs. And many of the people in our industry were living paycheck to paycheck. So I would say that us giving them an opportunity to make a really bad time when they're incredibly vulnerable, make their life better. We were able to execute on that mission, and that has expanded to unbelievable. It's been 13, I don't know, 11 years, something like that now that we've been kind of choosing to do the right thing. In the same vein, we started the National Wireless Safety Alliance during that same time frame, where we created portable credentials for the employees to carry rather than having an employer-owned credential. The employer didn't earn it. I mean, he might have taught you something, but the employer is the employer. And if you were an electrician or a plumber, a tradesman of any sort, you earned that training that you have. And what we did is recognize that, trying to restore the dignity of our trade. So there were a lot of things that that industry association led me to that I certainly didn't earn them, but I was blessed and fortunate to be there when they happened, when they
Right.
occurred.
Yeah, well, and then speaking of trades and building, so many men are involved in that in our society, and you actually wrote a book called or about building men. What inspired this book, and what do you see as the most pressing challenges in mentoring the next generation of whether it's tradesmen or business leaders?
Oh, well, I have to tell you, my son Ryan was doing an interview and someone asked him, like, what do you do? Like, what do you do now? Now you've risen up the food chain. What is it that you do? Like, what's your job? And he said, well, I used to build towers. I built guide towers, I built self-supporting towers, built monopoles, built glue lamp structures. I build every kind of tower you can build, and I'm really good at it. Now I build men. And I build men who build towers. And that struck with me. So that's where the name came from. I don't even get any credit for the name. However, the stories contained within, there's like 20 chapters, and each chapter focuses on a person who taught me a lesson, and that lesson has a character trait attached to it. And so if you think about, I mean, there's some titles: inspiration, meekness. One is about a teacher, belief, adding confidence to me as an individual, talk a bit about my grandpa, talk about my siblings. Loyalty is the chapter on siblings. It's pretty cool to look back on that. I have got 6 brothers and a sister. So yeah. So I take
That's
a shot at them in the book.
well, as you do when you when
Yeah.
you have siblings. I mean, it's only correct
Actually,
to
it's only good news, so I don't want to pick on them
good.
too much. I don't want to give a cheap shot. They'll fight back.
Yeah. Well, that's also part of the sibling rivalry, right? It just seems to continue one way or another. And certainly thankful for my siblings as well. They're always a formidable foe and friend
Yeah.
when it's needed.
For sure. Well, the book is just a collection of stories. It's, God didn't make me very smart, but he made me a pretty good storyteller. And so when I started to put this down on paper, I realized I don't have a lot of wisdom to share that wasn't handed to me. And by handed to me, in many ways, if you look at the way people learn, there's high tuition learning that we would call training by trauma,
Yeah.
and there's low tuition learning where someone gives you information by what they do. And as you sit back and watch them, and they do the right thing, you learn to execute by doing the right thing. And you do so in such a manner that you're mentored just by their mere presence. This book is a story about those people and the things that they did that affected me so deeply. It changed my life and the lives of generations behind me.
Yeah. Now, I was thinking of uncertainty and adversity. We talked a little bit about adversity, I think, before we hit the record button, but can you talk about that idea of embracing an uncertainty? Because we certainly live in a world that the time frame is now, and the idea is stability. So how do we convince others of the value of embracing the uncertainty?
I got a favor thrown at me. I was going to give a speech, and I think it was in Colorado. I believe it was in Colorado, and it was to a trade association. And I said, "Hey, I give this terrific speech on leadership." And they're like, "Yeah, we don't want that." I'm like, "Oh, okay. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, the market is really crazy right now. Everybody's scared for their jobs. Everybody's worried about what's going to happen. And so if you could talk about that." And what I did is I remembered that I broke my leg in a pretty serious way. And I was in a skiing accident, and we went to the doctor that night, and the doctor said, I was going to tell him, I'm like, "Don't worry, doc, I got this. You're going to like let the swelling go down. You'll pin it tomorrow and we'll be on our way." And he said, "No, if we don't operate in the next couple hours, you're going to lose your leg." And then I was non-weight bearing. And so in the construction industry, when you can't put any weight in your leg for 90 days or 3 months, it really changes everything. And all of a sudden, you can't take care of yourself and you can't do this, you can't do that. I ended up My leg didn't get taken off. My doctor told me, he said, "You're never gonna, you're probably gonna walk funny, and you'll certainly never run again." And so two things. I'm not gonna walk funny. I refuse to do that. And then second of all, thank you. I never liked running anyway. The uncertainty of that led me to challenge the notion that we were going to take the facts as presented to us and we're going to just accept them. I completed my third 5K terrain race. I've got another one scheduled for June 12th with 7 of my grandkids. They're going to
Nice.
run with me. And it's not, and again, I feel very fortunate to be able to do that, but it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. And we have to embrace the uncertainty, because whether I have a leg or not, life is going to go on. It's going to be what I make of it. And my attitude is going to determine whether this is going to be, bad emotionally and
Yeah.
spiritually, or
Yeah.
whether it's just going to be bad physically. Because it could
Right.
have turned out the other way, and I could be hopping or on another piece of
Device.
equipment, riding around
Yes.
in my scooter again. And so I think as we embrace uncertainty, and the only thing is certain is that change is coming. And so you can fight it, but it won't do you any good.
That's right. So
Yeah.
speaking of change and dealing with obstacles, there's an old saying of it goes, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Can you talk about that, how we actually do need that mindset renewal as we advance in projects or advance in years? We have to be that kind of person that if I'm convinced against my will, I need to maybe listen and see if I'm the common denominator in all my problems.
Yeah. Well, I had the great advantage to work for some and be raised by some stellar individuals that I talk about in the book. And one of those people is Leroy Lindell. He was the first boss I had out of college. And I remember he would say things that would generate understanding to me. And one of those was, "If it's going to be, it's up to me." And he would be the first guy to say, "Hey, you're gonna get up early and you're gonna do more faster, better than the other guy. And you don't have to beat him by much. You just got to beat him by 10 minutes." And if you do that, if you're 10 minutes ahead for the customer, if you're 10 minutes ahead for the quality meeting, if you're 10 minutes ahead for the sales call, if you're just ahead, and all it takes is to get up 10 minutes before him. And he would of attitude, and it was contagious, because his son who worked with him, that was my version. As I looked at that was my first "I'm working for you" version of a family business. And his son, I quote often in a keynote I give. It's like, and Tom was an amazing, and still is an amazing guy. He would tell us, "Hustle takes no talent." And so when I learned from these folks, I just took that information and transferred it on down the line. That's what the book, and frankly, my mission to my grandkids is like, character matters. And if you display it, people are going to pick up on it.
Yes. So, in that line, then, would you have some advice or some observations on how leaders who are like current leaders are effectively or can effectively cultivate character within that next generation that's coming up?
Yes. So I do a lot of work with companies on culture because it sounds kind of soft and mushy, like, I want to have a really nice culture. Do you want to have a really nice culture? I don't think that a nice culture is actually what we want or what we need. So when I talk to business leaders, I think we want an honest culture. I want people to know that I'm going to do what I say. I want people that are going to know that I respect them. I respect them when they're wrong, but I'll also let them know I think they're wrong. And that is healthy friction that is no longer sometimes welcomed in the workplace, but the environment that we grew up in. I mean, if you look at the generational changes, I got raised by what some would call the greatest or the silent generation. And it was like, sir, yes, sir. And kids are to be seen and not heard. And then my generation was kind of the hippie generation, and unfortunately, we didn't listen so well, and then we didn't mentor the following generation. Those millennials that came behind us, I don't think we did a very good job of mentoring them. And after that came the Generation Y, and it was crazy because now the alphas that are even a generation farther down, they're saying, "Hey, someone just teach me." Somebody come alongside me and mentor me. And that is some of what the companies are missing in large part. They just want people to train them and to listen. There's a thing that I do that I say, hey, if you've got these three fingers holding up, this one in the middle, this is the most important thing that we do as management. And it's generous listening. And then the ring finger involves relationships. Because if you don't generously listen, you can't build a relationship. And the relationship with someone younger than you takes the big finger, and then the little finger is the pinky, and that's respect. If you're, I mean, if you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, is respect earned or is it given? And
Yeah.
the answer is yes.
Yeah, exactly.
50% of our strength on our grip comes from the pinky finger. We lose a pinky finger, we lose 50%. So if you generously listen, build a relationship, and respect those, sometimes even before it's earned, you're going to have a culture that will build a company that's unstoppable.
Yeah. Right. It's really about attitude
Yeah.
and I'm sure teamwork.
Yep.
As has been said, teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah.
Can you talk about maybe how you had some situations where you realized you had to build some teamwork within your organization?
We started with teamwork. When you start with two people in a company and you get your first job and it's a three-person job, you better have a good team.
Yeah. Right.
And especially when you add that first crew, when you build a business, like we went from two to three. Well, if you go from two people to three people, you've added 50% to the
Yeah.
size of your company.
Right.
And then you take it to a crew. And then I, as a manager, I'm still involved in that crew. I see what they are. I know all their personal issues and all their families' issues and all the driving. I mean, they're everything that happens, you're intimately related with. Well, then it goes to two crews. And now you get a little bit removed because now you're out doing a bid walk or doing a quality control check or you're doing a safety check and you're not on site with that crew, three crews, and then at four crews, and then it goes to 20 crews. And I found myself at one point, I was down in the shop because we built a new shop, and there were people there that I didn't know, and I was just like flabbergasted. Like, what? How could this be that someone works here and I don't even know their name? Used to be I know their name, their spouse's name, their kid's name. I always religiously wrote a birthday card to every employee, but now I was writing
Yeah.
birthday cards to people I didn't know. And so that's when we started doing a weekly call, which became what we called legacy radio, which became on radio when we merged with another company, which became kind of the whole podcast for our industry so they could get to know what was important to us, which kind of became the Grampian, which, as you know, is a podcast that we're working really hard to communicate with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you look at building a culture, it's got to start from day one. It's got to be led from the front. Absolutely. Everybody at that business knows that if it's time to do something like sweep the floor, that you as the leader will be the first one to grab a broom. There's no job that's beneath you. There's no ivory tower.
Yeah.
And if you develop that kind of a culture, they will follow you into some pretty nasty places.
Yeah. I had heard the phrase once of hire the best people or build the best people and then take out their dry cleaning.
Yeah.
And just that, I guess some people might refer to that as servant leadership in a sense.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you before we've got a little bit left to chat about, but Jim, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is probably the Jim Tracy, www.thejimtracy.com. And got a website there. And then if you want to read alongside me, go on Barnes and Noble and look up Building Men by Jim Tracy, and you'll see we can pre-order the book that will be out there. Or if you want to listen to our podcast, it's on YouTube at The Grampian, GRAMPION.com, or The Grampian on YouTube.
That's great. So I wanted to ask you about the Bill Carlson Lifetime Service Award. How did this recognition influence your future goals and aspirations?
Bill Carlson is referred to as the grandfather of our industry. And he started as a soldier who was building communication facilities and then rolled that into a career and then rolled that career into a company. And on the heels of a very tragic event on one of his sites in Arkansas, he was driving home and he made a decision that said, we've got to do something to make this industry safer for our people. Talks about everything we've been chatting about,
Yeah.
doing the right thing and choosing the not necessarily the easy path, but he fundamentally changed our industry. The National Association of Tower Erectors, or the Communications Infrastructure Association, developed an award for people who had spent 15 years or more trying to do the right thing for the association, for the industry, for the people in the industry. And I was just honored and flabbergasted to receive that award, especially because it's named after someone who to me is a mentor and miss him greatly. Passed away a couple of years ago, and but his business is still running because he built something that lasts. And
Built
anyway,
something that lasts. That's good.
that award is right there alongside of his picture.
Oh, that's nice. That's good. Well, you obviously towers need foundations. You talked a little bit about your relationship with God and your Christian beliefs. If there's someone that has maybe they're not happy with where they're at in life or they realized they might have to dig up the foundation they've been building, what are those best practices maybe that you've come up with in light of career and faith and family for building a foundation that'll last?
If you're looking for something, that's probably what you'll find. And if you go to Matthew 6:33, it says, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all the rest will be granted unto you as well." And I can break that down in a lot of ways, but when you think about the word seek, it's actively go after. Look for it, search for it, seek it out, and then comes the when. First, before you do anything else, if you're not looking for a savior, you're probably not going to find one. And if you don't think you need one, I'll be the first one to tell you, here's the friction, you're wrong. So if you just, my personal life verse is seek first, Matthew 6:33, and I only need the first two words.
Yeah.
If I do that every day, if I get out of bed committed to seeking, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I encourage you to just go get a Bible. I hear a lot of people tell me, yeah, well, I read that. Well, the truth is that I don't know that a lot of people have ever read it cover to cover who it hasn't dramatically impacted their life. So I would,
That's
start
good.
with the Gospel of John. It's kind of like standard operating procedure and just read it and see. And if you're searching for it, you're probably going to find it. And
That's
that's
right.
going to be the source of hope. That's going to be a source of peace. That's going to be a source of contentment. That's going to be something that will fundamentally not only change your life, but change the life of your wife, your husband, your children, your grandchildren, and on and on and on.
Right. It's a generational win.
Yep,
And
exactly.
I would say with Matthew 6:33 that that's it. There's no strings attached to the rest of the verse. Kind of like Matthew 7:11. If you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will I, God, give good gifts to those who ask? So
Exactly.
it says we have not because we ask not. And so we just keep moving forward. And I would say another recommendation, if you are going to pick up the Word of God, a Holy Bible, and look for a spot, there happens to be 31 chapters in the book
Mm,
of Proverbs,
yep.
one for every day of the month. And that is a practice that I've had for a long time. And I definitely can see if I've had a problem, I find it within the pages of Proverbs, and it actually points out what I did to get to that spot, good or bad. And I want to ask you, just as we're wrapping up, I'd love to talk longer, but you're not that far away, so we could always drive over and have a visit. But
We'll meet in Montana.
yeah, meet in Montana. That'll be great. Looking back on your journey, what was one of the maybe a piece of advice you would like to give your younger self when you were starting the business?
There's a lot of times when discouragement can prevail. And take a little left turn here, there's a chapter in the book called Perseverance. I use hunting dogs to clear my mind. And so I would go out and I would train my dog. When you're working with your dog, you don't think about anything else. Kind of like flying. You don't get a chance to think about much else when you're flying. But but when I went into dog competitions, I went to the highest level. And when I first got there, I was at what's called in AKC would be a master retriever, and in the North America Hunting Retriever Association up in Canada it would be the CKC. It would be the highest level of retriever trials. I went 0 for 11. I went 0 for 11 my first 11 times. So you get up to plate 11 times, you're at the big leagues now, and you go 0 for 11. And there were two guys who came alongside me and said, just keep going. Just keep going. You're almost there. You're almost there. And so perseverance and the people who don't make it are always I can guarantee you, Wayne Gretzky, I mean, you
Yes,
miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
that's right.
And persevere. Don't allow the negative Nancy's to come alongside you and say you can't. There's always going to be someone who says you can't. And the truth is that if it's going to be Leroy,
Yeah,
it's up to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great line. And if there's levels, you might as well get to the top.
Yeah, it's always more fun to win.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I need to remind you, as listeners and viewers of 5am podcast, that Jim on his website has generously provided free resources to help you on your journey. And you can find those valuable tools at thejimtracy.com/media. You'll find a bunch of stuff there. You'll find a lot of information at thejimtracy. Some great pictures to look at, and there's books and videos. You'll enjoy your time. Jim, a sincere thanks for joining me today for the 5am podcast.
Michael is wonderful. I'm just truly thrilled to be able to be here. And I say thank you sincerely.
Yes. Well, your insights have been great, and it's just been such a great conversation. And I want to thank our viewers. Thank you for joining us. We know that this has been a great conversation for us. I'm sure that it is for you too, and we appreciate you joining in on this conversation. And if you haven't already, please help us grow this channel by sharing this with your friends. I often think, and if you listen to enough of these, you'll hear me say it's like Jim and I are sitting in a diner and you're behind one of us, and as you do in a diner, you eavesdrop on the conversation behind you. I mean, it just happens that way. So bring your friends, share this with your friends. I'm sure there's someone's name that's rolling around in your head that the good Lord has given you. They need to hear this. So send this their way. You'll help them. and you'll have done a good deed for one of your friends or enemies, as the case may be. Now, just a couple of other things. If you could be so kind as to give 5 a.m. Podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player, we would appreciate it. And I absolutely have to mention and give a sincere thanks to those who have ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. You've helped us out over the last couple of weeks, and we appreciate it. And we appreciate your participation in what we're doing here at 5am podcast. Thank you all for your support. And until next time, make sure to seize your day. And don't forget to get up and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets. I'm Michael Klassen. Thanks for being here today.